All right, Connor, we're live. Welcome to the show.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me.
So, Connor, you and I have had some fun conversations over the last little bit. We actually met on Twitter, which is not a dating site, but it seems like I meet a lot of fun people on Twitter. You've got a really fascinating background. You had an exit really before you even graduated college. So, walk us through your story, get us up to speed to what you've been working on and what got you here.
Awesome. Yeah. Again, thanks for having me. So for anyone listening, my name is Connor. Just graduated from Northeastern last year. So kind of in the COVID era, didn't actually get a graduation, but I got a piece of paper to prove it. And so I'm 23 today. And what Ryan's talking about in terms of having the acquisition previously was when I was in college, my co-founder and I, Gio, started a business. We were both pretty entrepreneurial. Families are entrepreneurs, kind of have come from that background. So like we knew it was something that we wanted to do during college. And we get to campus freshman year and we basically were like, you know what, let's sell something. I don't care, what it is, if it's like water bottles to t-shirts to whatever, like just want to sell something. We just totally had that itch. And for a lot of people on campus that we're friends with, like they had the same thing. And so what we ended up starting to do was researching different products that we were all using today on a daily basis. I think like, we're 18 years old, so we have no idea what we're doing, but we went on the blogs, we're like, how to come up with a business idea? And they're like, find things that you use every single day. And we're like, okay, cool. And so we obviously use our phones like probably 200 times a day. And what we noticed is that as soon as we got to campus, we get a student ID and we have to use that thing everywhere, dining halls, you get to get into dorms, everything like that. So we ended up going and taking, like when we get to campus, all the different clubs on campus, all the different massive companies who want to go and market to 18-year-olds as soon as they get to college and they want to start spending money, start handing out a ton of free promotional swag. And so one of the more common things that we started seeing were these things called like phone wallets. And for anyone who doesn't know what they are, they're essentially like silicone or lycra material. You stick them onto the back of your phone or phone case and you can hold in there like credit cards, student IDs, cash, things like that. And so that's something that like, first of all, I had never seen that in high school. And so when I was on college now, I was finally saying like, okay, this is actually kind of a cool product. I use this on a daily basis. Like I don't even carry a wallet around with me anymore at this point. And so I started talking to my buddy and we're like, yeah, like what if we did this, but like with designs or something like that? Because all the girls that we knew had like $80, like Lululemon or Vera Bradley or Lilly Pulitzer, like phone cases. And then they would just go and smack on like the local real estate company who was trying to go and get some marketing on campus on the back of their phone. So what we ended up doing was we, found a supplier over on Alibaba and ordered 2,000 different of these phone wallets from China, like immediately. And so we get them into our college dorm room and we get to the point where we're like, okay, cool, let's go sell this all around campus. Like we had no idea, no intention of becoming an e-commerce brand back then. And we sold them to all of our friends and our friends being good friends ended up buying from us. And then we got to a point where like, well, who do we sell to now? We still have like, 1,900 and like 55 of these things left. And so we ended up going and like trying to go and build a website. And we're like, okay, well, we can't profitably get customers right now on Facebook ads. Like, again, we had no idea what we were doing. So we're like, can we sell these on Etsy? And we sold a couple on Etsy. But what we finally ended up doing was listing them on Amazon. And, we had a couple different designs that both of our girlfriends designed for us at the time to kind of make, them more aesthetically pleasing. And we listed them on Amazon, and this is probably May or June at this point. And I think that first year we started doing like 30K in sales. And like, again, this is coming from a place where like our bank accounts collectively had like $2,000 in them. So 30K in sales for us was like definitely a pretty big deal. We were really excited about it. And yeah, like over the next 4 years that we're in school together, like Northeastern's pretty awesome. We have a co-op program there. And so it lets you go and work for companies. And so one of our second co-ops, we actually ended up doing it for ourselves, going full-time in the business without having to like drop out or take a leave from school, which is actually really nice. And we're able to kind of scale up the business. I think year one was 30,000, year two, 150,000. And then in year three, we went on co-op for ourselves and hit 850,000. And then we went back to classes. And I think we hit 1.2 million in sales just before we ended up selling the business last year. So yeah, we basically scaled it out. The secret was really just adding a ton of different product variants and really doubling down on everything that we were doing on Amazon. Like 99.9% of our sales came through Amazon, just because with a low price product like phone accessories, you really don't have to go and pay a ton of money to go and you don't have a ton of margin to go and pay a ton of money to Facebook or Google to go and actually make that acquisition. And so when we're ranking on the first page on Amazon for terms like phone wallet, phone accessories, things like that, it's actually pretty profitable, pretty fast.
No, I love that. There's a lot to take away from that. Like first off, you had $1 million business before you even graduated. Everybody's like, I need to make money after they graduate rather than just like, hey, let's start, right? What's the worst that can happen? You get 2,000 units and you just kind of wing it. And of course, as an 18, 19-year-old, though, you're probably thinking like, oh, we're going to sell these to all our friends. And then 45 friends later, you don't have any more friends left to sell them to. I love that.
Exactly. It ran out pretty fast.
But I guess like kind of taking a step back, it's like you had your head on a swivel and you started looking around like, what's happening? What is happening around me? What is needed? And if you do that long enough, and it doesn't have to be super long, a few weeks, a few months, you will find products and ideas that need to be launched and released into the market. So that was awesome. You're crushing it. You're about to graduate, and you and your partner, are you going different directions? Why sell the business? Were you looking to take some money off the table? Why sell?
Yeah, so I think that's definitely a good question. In terms of why sell, I kind of break it down and take a step back for a couple different reasons. One, again, at this point, like neither of us are rolling in cash, right? We're still college students. We're making good money from this kind of stuff, but with e-commerce specifically, especially a physical good product where we're growing month over month, every single month for the past 2 years, every dollar is getting reinvested into new products, new inventory. So like at this point, we still weren't really taking that big of a paycheck at all, if any. It's the occasional distribution of like, hey, I want to go to on this trip with my girlfriend this weekend, or there's a big party coming up, like let's take some money out for that. But no real cash off the table. And the other thing that was really kind of stressing us out was, unlike Shopify or an e-commerce business where you own the website, you own everything, like you have this email list, like, worst case scenario, Google delists you or something like that, right? Like that's okay, because you can still run Facebook ads. You still have your email list to go market to. You can still work with like influencers and all that kind of stuff. When we're 99.9% on Amazon, like from our standpoint, that was a huge risk, because we've heard stories time and time again of Amazon sellers getting delisted, their account getting shut down overnight. If Amazon sees you're logging in from multiple IPs, they'll suspend your account for a week. We hear horror stories about like the inventory getting lost in Amazon's warehouse. And so like, it's not that the business was bad, but the business had a lot of risk. And I think that both of us felt a little uncomfortable holding on to that risk for a longer period of time, because like this was kind of like our golden goose. All of our eggs were in this basket, and if this thing got turned off overnight, like we had nothing to show for it. And so we really weren't too sure what we were going to do after graduation. My buddy worked, an IB job for his last co-op. I went to work at a startup because our thought process was like, this Cardly thing is going great, but when else are we going to have the time to like take a risk-free 6-month job at any company, without having the downside of looking like you quit or whatever like that, right? So we wanted to go and just do one more job. And then by the time that we were finished that job, we're like, okay, like we still haven't really worked on it that much, but when we did work on it, it was growing a lot. So let's just try this one thing. It's senior year. We're going to the senior year. Let's just list it for sale on a brokerage site. Let's put like a pretty aggressive multiple compared to what a lot of Amazon brands are getting these days, and just see what happens, right? And we put it up there. I think it was up there for like 7 months, and it got to the point where like I think we had 3 calls over 7 months. And they were all just tire kickers, people who were just like, oh, like, we're UPenn graduates looking for the next big D2C brand. And I'm like, okay, dude, like, I don't care what you're doing. Like, you're clearly not interested. So we got pretty discouraged from that. But I think both of us together were just like, okay, well, we did set the multiple like pretty aggressively. And then on top of that, like we really like, if we don't sell this thing, it's fine. Like we have a profitable cash flowing business that we'll just graduate from and run full time. So we were pretty discouraged. We were actually thinking about, this is like December at the time, thinking about taking the business off the brokerage site the following month, just like the starting of the year. We figured I think we had to finish out a contract or something like that with them. And we get a buyer call on like December 26th of 2019. And we're like, okay, like I told him, I was like, dude, I'm hungover. I'm not going to go to this thing. And he's like, all right, like, but we are delisting it like next week. Like, let's just jump on just for like the hell of it. And I was like, fine. So like, I almost missed the meeting, ended up jumping on the call, and we get a broker talking to the buyer. And this woman's like, yeah, I've actually bought your product 3 times before. Like, I love your product. When I came out on here, like looking for a company to buy, like I was looking for a product just like yours, like would love to make the deal go through. And I was like, okay, cool. So like, any questions for us? She's like, yeah. The one question I had is like, would you guys feel comfortable selling the business? I was like, yeah, I
That's
think
why
we
we're
would.
talking, right?
Yeah, I was like, yeah, absolutely. And so again, keep in mind, this is after my buddy just finished up a co-op where like he was one of like the only analysts at this investment bank over in Oregon for like 6 months. So he was doing all this deal flow. He's like used to due diligence. So she gets off the call. The broker, and you know, in our head, we're like, these calls have never gone that well. Like whatever. She sounded interested, but who knows? The broker was like, guys, yeah, we'll see what happens. Like, you know, you never know with these kind of things. And he's like, oh shit, she just wired the money. And so she just wired all the cash to the guy on the spot. And my buddy and I were like, cool. So like, what do we do? He's like, well, I've never really seen this before. So let me go and talk to her and make sure she's cool with us all. But if everything goes according to plan, yeah, we'll get the paperwork done. So we're like, okay, this must be like a tax thing. Like she must have made a ton of money on her other businesses because I think she owned a couple other brands. She's probably just trying to get like a huge write-off at the end of the year. And so I asked her about that. She's like, no, I just want to buy it now. And I was like, could we make the deal go through on January 1st of 2020? And she's like, yeah, it's fine. So we ended up signing everything January 1st. There was like a month long, probably 6-week long, you know, inspection, migration process, all that kind of stuff, transferring over the accounts, making sure everything's good, reconciling the inventory, all that kind of stuff. And like come mid to late February, close the deal, money in the bank, and good to go. Yeah, it was probably, talking to my buddy who did IB for a while, he's like, I've never seen a process go through with such a fast turnaround and such like a lack of like complaints or like questions during the due diligence.
That's amazing. I've never heard a story like that before. Like I see a lot of transactions. That was amazing. And I guess going back to the original part of like why sell to, like, Connor, you're talking about like an e-commerce brand. And most people think like an e-commerce brand, if you're growing really fast, it's awesome. It actually means you have no money. It means because you've taken all your money and you're putting it into more inventory. And I had an e-commerce brand with hundreds of $1,000s of inventory at one point. And I was like, if this gets, you know, and now the joke would be like, if a boat gets stuck in the Suez Canal, I could be screwed because I'm not getting my product here,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And to hit on that point real quick, like, so in terms of cash flow, like from an e-commerce brand, we actually were somewhat lucky in the sense that, you know, we're selling a $10 product, like their phone accessories, they cost 20, 30 cents to make, right? So it's like compared to a lot of brands who like actually have a pretty tight margin with the products, like we weren't as constrained as they were. And we also negotiated a ton of terms with our suppliers. So like we had some cash flow coming in towards those later days, but still, like to your point, like we were growing pretty quickly. And so the bank account never looked as nice as the business size was. And I think that was one of the main reasons, right? Just taking the cash off the table. And I think the other reason to really hit on it, like if we thought about what is probably the best transitionary time for us, if we're ever going to go and sell this business, like when should we do it? And our thought was we're graduating in May. It's, you know, January right now. Like this is kind of the perfect opportunity to sell this thing now, get money in the bank, and be able to go and work on something new after college. And then on top of that, like, none of our friends knew the scale that we were at. Like all of our friends, like kind of knew us as like, you know, these phone pocket, like phone wallet guys, but like they all thought we were selling like, you know, couple tens a day,
$20,000 a year, right? They had no idea.
Right. Grand sum, $20,000 a year. And so they were all like, you know, shocked. And then I think the other piece of it that was really beneficial for us is like take a step back from the financial side. Financial side, we got a nice payday. It was a really good day. And like, it really set us up for what came in the next couple of months. But more than anything, like we got a freaking Forbes article written about us for, you know, selling this business when we were still in school. And I think that there was a ton of great opportunity from press connections, being able to go and get like mentored by different people solely because of age. I genuinely think that's like a huge advantage is like, if I sold a company the same size and I was 20 years older, zero press, no one's talking about it. No one cares. But because we still have that student card, I think it definitely helped a lot.
That's one thing I didn't maximize enough as a student. As a student, you can literally call anybody you want and tell them you're a student. And they're like, yeah, cool, I'll help you out. But the second you're not a student, they don't want anything to do with you. So,
oh yeah, man. It's like, hey, you know, Tim Cook, it's like, I'm working on a class research project. Like, what do you think about this? And it's like, you might get a reply, but like, you know, you're 26 years old. It's like Tim Cook. He's like, dude, leave me alone.
Yeah. I'm going to send the cops to your house. So
yeah, exactly.
Well, dude, congratulations. So that was a year and a half ago. You had a big exit, and that's a crazy deal how that went down. And it's crazy to think that you were a week away from pulling it. You almost didn't show up to the meeting. Like a lot of weird things could have happened and not had that go. So from now, okay, so a year and a half ago, you sell your business, you probably all, okay, we're going to go graduate, we're going to move on to the next opportunity. What was next? What are you working on now? And how did, I know you've had some additional acquisitions. What did that lead into, and how are those conversations around that?
Yeah, so let's talk about the acquisitions first, because those were kind of like most chronologically timely. So we sold the business mid-February. 3 weeks later, COVID hits. Like the entire world shuts down. We're like, oh, that was well timed. Not intentional, but it's definitely like timely. And of course, people don't realize, but phone wallets are not an essential item. And so Amazon went through that whole thing where like they were only shipping essential items.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So in terms of what happened afterwards, my co-founder and I, Gio, like we get bored very easily. I think that's both a huge advantage and a huge disadvantage, is just that us sitting around doesn't typically go well. Usually we'll have something spin up by the end of the week, even if it's like a bad idea.
Yeah.
But so the first acquisition basically went down where we're involved in Trends, the Facebook group owned by The Hustle, which I guess is now owned by HubSpot. And my girlfriend and I, it was her birthday. I took her away to this conversation we were just having before we started recording. It's like I took her away to this tiny house retreat. It's called Getaway. Really cool spot if anyone wants to go and check it out. And we stayed at like this tiny little cabin, like 400 square foot cabin or something like that overnight. We brought a bunch of food. It was really cool, fun experience. And I was like, these are awesome. So I texted Gio, and this is like 2 months after the business. I was like, let's build a goddamn like tiny house, like mobile home park or whatever, and like just do the same exact thing. And then literally like 2 or 3 days afterwards, in that Facebook group, in the Trend Facebook group, I see some guy post, and he's like, hey, I own this tiny house blog. It's for sale. At the peak, we were doing this in revenue, and now we're doing this in revenue. If anyone wants to buy it, hit me up. And I was like, send that to him. And I was like, actually, like, this probably seems a lot easier. Let's do this instead. And so I send this to him, and he goes and basically, we start DMing the guy. He doesn't get back to us for like a week, because, we later find out he got like 100 DMs, all from people like trying to go and buy the thing and talking to him about it. And we finally get, talking to him, and we basically are like, hey, like, we're actually really interested. Like, can you respond? And he's like, okay, sorry about that. Like, the third message kind of resonated, because most people were sending me one message and then falling off. So I just kind of got overwhelmed. But we ended up going back and forth between, us and one or two other buyers on this thing. And it was a low deal, like super low, basically high 4 figures, low 5 figures, in terms of what we ended up buying the blog for. But we didn't go through a broker or anything. We went through escrow.com, and it was super simple. Like, the blog name is tinyhouse4.us, us. And so we ended up buying this thing. And I think the immediate value add from our standpoint is like, our entire background is in e-commerce. We've never done media buying or any kind of like content ever. So it's just like, from our standpoint, it's just a new challenge. And I think what really excited us was, with tiny houses specifically, there's a ton of lead gen opportunities. They had a 36,000 person mailing list that they didn't monetize at all, like email list. They had a bunch of pages on their site that were super slow, a bunch of pages on their site that basically like, said like, here are the top 5 like washers or whatever for a tiny house, that weren't linked to any affiliate links. They had affiliate links for, what was it, tiny house building plans that like they weren't really monetizing and promoting that well. So we were just like, okay, we're buying this thing. I think we bought it for like a 3 or 4x multiple or something like that. We're like, we could probably make the money back in a year. And worst case scenario, say it all goes to hell, like we're not out $100,000, $1 million or anything like that. We're out, a couple grand. So we bought this thing, immediately hired some writers. That process was pretty fun. And then hired someone to go manage all the writers. So now I'm not even thinking about this at all on a day-to-day basis. And we hired some guy actually on Twitter. I almost want to find what his name was. I give him a shout out just in case, the off chance that he does listen to this. Trey, what's up, Trey? If you listen to this, and Trey has basically just been a beast. Where I'm like, Trey, I'm going to be straight up with you, man. Like, we have this 36,000 person email list. We're sending out an email like once a week, once every other week, whatever we do. And we aren't sending it out with a single sponsor on them. Any sponsor you get, I'll give you like 30% of the deals, and like just 30% commission straight away. And I think he's in college or something like that right now. So I think to him, like, very attractive deal. Like, he has to send a couple emails a week, coordinate with us, the advertisers, and then we get sponsored. So at this point, like the blog, it's been 11 months. I think we're about 40 to 50% paid back, if not a little bit more on all that. And so that was the first acquisition. We can stop there for a sec.
Let me pause right there, Connor, because what you just described is what I try to get through and try to look for in my own acquisitions. Like, you found a business that had some traffic, online or offline, doesn't matter, right? But it had 30. So you looked at a few things and you realized, hey, there's some low hanging fruit here, and there's underutilized assets. You have 30,000 emails with no sponsor, not being emailed very well, no upkeep. Now that, there might be some dead emails in there, but that's like instantly, bam, a lot of traffic can be driven. You can sell ad space in there. Like, there's a lot of things that can be done very quickly. The next thing is like, you identified slow pages, or you identified pages that didn't have affiliate links. So there's already traffic and people on these web pages. But really what you're doing is looking around and saying, hey, all these assets that exist, they're just underutilized. They're there, but they're not even monetized. And that's like step one when you're looking and evaluating a business, is finding where are the key areas in this business that they're not doing right now. And email is almost, if they have an email list, it's like 99% of the time they're not managing it correctly. And every e-commerce brand, if you're not getting 20 to 25% of your revenue through your emails, you're not doing it right. Right. And so I love the fact that you just keyed in on like 3 or 4 different points. You're like, even if we just make these changes, we'll make your money back in a year rather than in 3 years.
Yeah, 100%. I think really what it came down to, as well as like our background is in e-commerce. And I think there's a big difference when your background's in e-commerce versus media, because the traditional media mindset is like, I'm going to build this thing. I'm going to convince people to go and read my stuff. And while people are going to read my stuff, I'm going to convince someone to go and advertise on it. Right. Our entire background is like, I don't give a shit if you read my stuff at all. And sorry if I'm not allowed to curse on the pod. We can blur that out later. But all I care about is you buy something on these pages. So we quickly reframed it so that way, almost all of the articles we started putting out, we still put out some stuff that was like, young 20 couple buys tiny house and their dog is so happy, right? Like, we still put out that because we want people to be happy. And those are honestly like the cheaper, easier articles to write anyway. But the bigger thing we're putting out now is like, if you type in like tiny house appliances, we're dominating that search result now. If you type in like, what is the best tiny house stove? What is the best tiny house refrigerator? Like things like that. That's what I care about, because if you own a tiny house, like, who the hell is searching up best tiny house refrigerator and doesn't own a tiny house? And so we basically go now have
to buy, like they are looking to buy, and nobody was ranking for it.
The keyword ranking wasn't that hard. We filled it up with a bunch of keywords, and we just started publishing content weekly. And as soon as we started doing that, we started seeing sales go up like almost double overnight, because we were doing all the affiliate stuff on top of getting the earned media advertising and being able to build the email list too. So yeah, it was definitely a fun opportunity. I think our next goal with it is to figure out, okay, what are the best appliances, fixtures, things like that, right? Like can we go and build the world's best like compactable table? And now do we have a distribution channel of like thousands of people who own tiny houses and just sell them that through the media channel, right? I think that's kind of the next step in the process.
That's the next step that a lot of people with content sites don't take, is like, you can go make your 3, 10, 20%, or you can go make your 30 or 40% so you're going to make your 10% if you're an affiliate, but you might make 30 or 40% if you actually sell the e-commerce side of things. We'll have to sync afterwards, because I know someone who could source you your table and your furniture for you perfectly. So,
yeah, that'd be really cool, actually.
Yeah, that's this is awesome. This is such a cool idea, and I'm just thinking, my mind's turning. Anytime I see a cool business, I think, well, what can I write off by owning this business? And basically any vacation, any Airbnb, you have an ability. Now you have a partner on this deal, right? But that's instantly, it goes through my mind, is some of my businesses, they're small, but it's like, well, how do I use this to enhance my lifestyle? And it's just like, well, I have to go do research. You know what I mean? And so in this case, you're doing tiny house research, you're writing about it, you're taking photos. Like, it's just really cool how you can go about that.
Dude, there's the tiny house side of things, right? So my thought is, because we can talk about Respo Collection a little bit later on too, but like that's all cars. So like my thought is like, okay, we got houses covered with Tiny House blog, we got cars covered with the Respo Collection. Like next up, we're starting a food blog. Like no doubt about it, But yeah, I totally agree. That's a great point.
One of those travel websites all about the travel points or whatever it is. So
yep, exactly.
So you mentioned your car brand. Let's dive into that with just a few minutes left. Talk about your car brand that you launched.
Well, so I'll mention that quickly. I do think there was one other business I bought that I actually think your listeners would really find interesting, because it's something that I think I made a huge mistake on, and we actually turned it around since, and it's been really profitable since. But I can kind of let you know about that too.
Let's dive in. That's awesome.
All right. So basically we bought a digital product business. It's all in like a photography space. And so they let people like customize their photos, add like video enhancements, like all this kind of stuff, right? The digital products in my side, I was like, okay, we have 100% margins. This guy built the website. It looks beautiful. He's got really high converting ads right now. But again, this is kind of coming off the win from the tiny house stuff where like we found instant improvements. I think the one thing I would tell anyone who's looking to go and buy a business is like, make sure that you understand what you're buying. And so when we bought this tiny house blog, we weren't paying for like, you know, the writers. It didn't come with any writers. Like we were paying for the search results, right? They're already ranked for a ton of content and had reoccurring cash flow from this media stuff, from all the advertisements over the past like 5 years. So that was really confident. And we bought an email list is really what we ended up buying, right? And so I think we had a 36,000 person email list and we had good Google indexing on top of like, you know, a couple articles in the backlog, things like that. Now, when I bought this digital product business, here's actually how the deal came to be. The guy also posted in Trends. He's like, hey, I'm working on this thing. Like, anyone know anything about this? I hit him up. I was like, hey, I've done e-commerce. Like, what are you working on? And he's like, oh, I'm working on this, like, you know, digital product business. Like any interest at all in like buying it? I was like, actually, yeah, like I'd buy it from you. Like, what, you built the website, you have the products all set, you have the ad set. Like, yeah, I would buy this from you. And he's like, okay, it's gonna be like $7,000. And I was like, cool. And then he's like, actually, you know what? I changed my mind. Like, I want to go and run this thing for a month or two, and then I'll get back to you if I still want to sell it. I was like, okay, go for it. He came back. He's like, dude, you know, I scaled this thing up. I made some awesome ads for this, and I'm running Facebook ads right now. Like, check this out. You know, we have, I think it was like $5,000 in profit or something like that a month. And like, we did that in the first month alone. Like, I think this thing's going to be huge. He was like, would you still be interested in buying it? I was like, like sneaky. Like, now you have like a multiple that you kind of base it off of, but like you have 30 days in sales. I was like, sure. Like, what do you want from it now? And I think he wanted to do like a year's worth of sales or something like that. Or sorry, not a year's worth of sales. He wanted to take the profit you earned from that month times it by 12. So he wanted like 60 or something. I think it was something around that ballpark. And I was like, no. I was like,
history.
Yeah. I was like, I will give you, and I think at this point, like, again, I didn't really know, but I was like, the thing seems to be working really well. I think I gave him like a 4 or 5x monthly profit multiple. So I think we bought the thing for like 20 something grand or whatever, roughly. Again, still on the lower scale, but somewhere in that range. And he was like, yeah, cool, I'll do that. I was like, okay, cool. So we ended up, you know, doing the same thing, escrow, signed a bill of sale, all that kind of stuff. And I took it and I was like, in my head, I'm like, cool, this thing's cash flowing. I'm actually not going to pay attention to it as much. But what I realized is that when I bought it, what I was really buying was I was buying a winning ad is really what I just paid for, right? Because a winning ad and a functional website, because in reality, he had no email list that I could go and continue reselling to. You know, he had a couple customers from selling the $5,000 in profit, but no real email list. The website wasn't ranking for anything. I bought a winning ad and I bought a website. And so what I totally made a mistake on is I bought it in like May. That summer, I didn't spend a ton of time trying to optimize things. Like, my background's not in Facebook ads and stuff. So I didn't do that great of a job. And I saw revenue dip and dip and dip and dip month over month. And it got to the point where I was like, in October and November, I was like, damn, like, you know, we're still making profit every month, but nowhere near like what we were making before. And so I ended up bringing in one of our buddies who's running an e-commerce store. And I was like, hey, like, we own this asset. I think it can be big. You're like really good at Facebook ads and you're really good at going and optimizing a bunch of landing pages and all that kind of stuff. Like, is there anything that you think that you can kind of do for this business right now? He's like, yeah, like I'll work on it. And so we wrote up a structure where basically, like, as sales grow, whatever the trailing 3 months average is, that'll go in and properly incentivize him to go and get more equity in the company. I told him, I was like, dude, here's what we bought it for. Like, here's what we want to go and sell it for. Scale this thing out for the next 12 months. And we'll go and do a profit share with you based on whatever equity you have at the time. And then when we go and sell the thing, we'll split it a third. And he was like, yeah, that works for me. And since then, he's turned it around completely. We're doing more in profit now than we were doing when we originally bought the business. And I quickly realized, like, damn, hire operators and just give them the right incentives and they will absolutely take the ball and run with it. So it's turned around since, but I quickly realized, like, just know what you're buying and know what skills and value adds you can really bring to the table.
I think that's really critical too, is you aligned incentives. You brought someone on board and said, hey, look, this is exactly what we paid for. This is what we're trying to do. These are the issues. You can solve this, but what's interesting to you? And what if we give you a third of the upside? And all of a sudden he's like, I can go on Facebook ads and, charge an e-commerce brand $500 or $1,000 a month, or I could potentially make significantly more money.
100%.
Now you got like, and when push comes to shove, he's going to work on your campaigns first because they're his campaigns. So he's honestly going to double down on what his most incentivized project is. So
yeah, that was my exact thought, and I think that's been probably the biggest lesson on it all. So like I said, he's been absolutely crushing it. The game plan, we've talked about it a couple different times now, is like scale things out from an SEO, paid, and like affiliate side, right? Do a little bit of influencer work there, and then come time December, the end of this year, hopefully, I think based on the numbers I've been doing in my head, I definitely feel optimistic about being able to sell it for somewhere in the 5 to 7x what we paid for it range. So definitely think that there's gonna be some good upside.
That's awesome, man. Some of these acquisitions don't have to be massive, don't have to be like, bet the farm. You can take little bets, learn a ton of things, make these mistakes on these small ones, but also like you're still going to walk away with a 5x investment. And it's always going to lead to a fun story, right? So this is a fun story to tell your buddies. Hey, we blew up this up, or hey, check out this website, I own it. So part of it is, I'm not saying buy a company for the stories, but stories are a side benefit.
Definitely a side benefit, especially when the stories are good.
Yeah. Well, so last thing, with a couple minutes left, talk about you got a lot of projects. You're full-time in all your entrepreneurship endeavors. Walk us through what you're working on right now and your car brand.
Yeah, man. So the main thing I'm working on right now and spending a majority of my time on is Respoke Collection. So it's like basically, if anyone's curious on the spelling, it's RESPOKE collection. And so what it is that my buddy and I, my background's e-commerce, as I mentioned. His background is entirely in cars. The dude was, the creative director or the creative agency that worked with like Michelin, BMW, a bunch of these big brands. And so we were like, how can we go and kind of combine these? And what we ended up doing is, if you've seen any of these like pet portraits where people can go and upload a photo of their pet, get a total caricature of it, hang it up as a poster or canvas in their house, we're doing that for people's cars. And we started doing this 11 months ago. Since then, we've gotten featured in Car and Driver, Road and Track, Hagerty Auto Insurance, like all of these really Auto Week, right? Like all of these really big name brands because of his connections and partially just like some hustle in terms of like trying to reach out to these people. But car enthusiasts are absolutely loving the brand. I think one of the things that we're trying to do right now is just figure out like, okay, how do we go and take this business from where it's at today and just 10x it by the end of the year. And I genuinely, we had our planning meeting today just for this quarter, or this upcoming quarter, Q2. And I genuinely think that there's like a very clear path. Like we're working with a lot of people in the space, in the print on demand space. And we kind of have like these like monthly e-commerce masterminds. I hate the word, but I don't really know what else to call them, but peer group calls. And they're super valuable. And we're learning what's working with everyone in the space. And I think one of the things we're trying to scale up right now is like today, if you look at the brand today, we're a print on demand business. Like people, which for anyone listening, and we talked about e-commerce cash flow issues earlier, like print on demand is the opposite. You get paid and then you pay for the product, which is kind of beautiful compared to paying for 1,000 products and selling them one at a time over the next 2 months. And so what our real goal is, and I think what both of our focus is two things. One, we do the print on demand stuff today. Let's scale that out, right? It's working. We've proven that it's worked. We've built an entire artist network that creates the rendering of the customer's cars, all that kind of stuff, motorcycles, boats, all that kind of stuff. Like we're expanding that space out. And then the other thing is start private labeling some products. So like that's kind of getting into the other side of the cash flow. But I really do think that there's a huge opportunity to build like just really badass car apparel, less so apparel, more accessories, garage decor, things like that. Like you're working with an audience and a demographic that has a pretty high disposable income. And so just building that really custom stuff that that they're willing to pay for, I think is going to be really key for us. And then the last side of it is also using all of the car content out there to kind of build a bit of a media business on top of that. Because I think one of the things that we're noticing with a lot of different brands in the space is that they get so sucked into that Facebook, rat race where it's, hey, I spend X dollars, I get Y dollars. I spend X dollars, I get Y dollars. And you kind of just get trapped into thinking like, if we ever want to go and sell this business down the road, nobody, at least what I've learned now, is not very many people want to buy a Facebook ad only business. You want to have diversified traffic streams. And so one of the things we're looking to doing now is like saying, okay, how can we go and build out, like, whether it's a Facebook group, a newsletter, Instagram meme pages, like whatever the hell it is, to go and get traffic from different sources. So that way we're able to go and really build a brand that is less just drop ship. Here's your custom car portrait, and more of, hey, here is Respoke Collection, this totally badass like automotive brand. And here's like all the content they put out. Here are the new monthly drops they're releasing. Here's the signature products that are like their best sellers. So I think we've got some pretty big goals lined up for this year.
Man, you got a lot of projects. How do you manage them all?
So the way I manage most of them, the tiny house stuff on autopilot for the most part now. The biggest and most important thing that I have to do is send out invoices and pay people on time. But that's, a fraction of the work that's being done. I outsource a lot of that stuff. With the digital product business, we hired an operator. So the guy I was just talking to you about, he's running it full time, and I really just have a weekly call, check in with him. And then the Respoke stuff is probably my most hands-on project that I'm working on right now. And I think what it really comes down to is, like, every week in the beginning of the week, I write down like, hey, I've got 50 hours of like structured time this week to really just put into these projects. Where is it going? And what does like a great week look like? And honestly, the more stuff that I can outsource and the more stuff that I can at least plan for, the more successful my week was going to be. I think a lot of people take the approach of, I don't have that much money, so I can't really go and outsource, or, thinking to themselves like, oh, I'll work on this as it comes along. Like, if you don't plan it, you're not going to do it. And so I try to plan all my week, and then I try to outsource all of the minuscule tasks. So like, for example, with the Respoke stuff, we have a lot of processes in place where someone uploads a photo of their car. Now that car goes and gets tagged based on the car brand and the car type. Now it goes and gets sent over to this designer. That designer sends a proof back. The proof's approved or not. It goes to get sent back to the designer for any revisions, and then it gets sent to the printing press, right? We have a VA now at this point managing all of those operations. And I think, one quote and one book that really changed my life is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And the quote in it is, you want to go and start working on your business versus working in your business. And so what that means is, like, in the early days, yeah, you're going to answer every customer email. You're going to add that extra service touch. You're going to go and fulfill all of the orders yourself and everything by hand. But when you're doing all that kind of stuff and it's taking up a bunch of your time, it prevents you from being able to think strategically on what partner should we land next to go and really go and blow up our ad campaign, or, how do we go and increase the conversion rate on our website from 2% to 3% to 4% today, right? And so I think one of the things that I'm trying to really focus on is building out as many SOPs and playbooks as possible, outsourcing those to people on Fiverr, people on Upwork, so that way I can spend my time thinking about the more strategic, high-level things to really grow the brand.
I love that. That's actually one of the most underrated business books, I think, is the E-Myth Revisited, or the E-Myth, whatever it's called. It allows you, it completely changes your mindset of working in your business as an employee or working on your business to grow it. And when you can separate those two, every task you're doing, you ask yourself, am I working on my business or in my business? And when you have that, it takes time, and you probably should be hiring things out a lot sooner than you can afford, right? You don't wait till you've made it. You'll never make it if you have to do everything yourself.
And I will say, if you're in the early stages of starting a business, that's really stressful, right? Like, I think there's the age-old saying of like nobody, when they're starting a business, wants to go and hire an accountant. But some of the most expensive mistakes that people make in the early days is not hiring an expensive accountant, right? Like hiring a good accountant. I think people tend to just be a little bit too frugal with the money early on, but if you actually go and deploy it in the right way, it'll save you hours. It'll make you way more money. It'll grow the business way faster.
100%, especially when you said accountant. People get so messed up on that after the fact, and it's really hard to undo 3 years of really bad finances, and it might not even be feasible, right? So, right. Connor, this has been an absolute pleasure. Where can people follow you? Where can they find your podcast? Where can they follow what you're doing?
Absolutely. The best place and where I share most of my ideas is on Twitter. Like Ryan said at the beginning of the call, it's kind of like the community town square where I just like to meet new people. So hit me up at C_GRO, at C_grow. And then, if anyone's interested in checking out the podcast, it's called The Next Generation. What inspires me the most and kind of what made me want to go and start the podcast is, I see people doing badass things in their 40s, 50s, 60s all the time, right? Like, and people talk about that stuff all the time. And that's all I really see in the news. What I don't see enough of are the people who are, 18, 19, 20s, early 20s, launching awesome businesses, becoming awesome athletes. Like we're basically interviewing the next generations of content creators, athletes, and business owners who are in their 20s today. So, we've recently interviewed like the CrossNet guys who are building a 10-figure brand. Some people who are just sold $50 million worth of Gravity blankets last year, like all this kind of crazy stuff. And they're in their 20s. So check that out too, if you're interested in another pod.
I think you got to interview yourself on your own podcast. Love what you're doing. Love the next generation. We'll link to all those in the show notes. Connor, thanks for joining us.
Ryan, thanks for having me on, man.